I saw the list, but I've not gotten all the questions just yet. If you can send that along. I checked. Maybe you sent it to my email. Uh, oh, Slack. Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. I'll put out now. That's fine. Okay, scene. Okay, I'll pull them from here. And when we're ready to go, we shall start. Okay. Do I need to like put out like the questions on the like show the questions, so I can just call them out? Which one would be preferable? Okay, perfect. Okay, let me pull up sheets and yeah, get this underway. Untitled form. Okay, perfect. Yes, I'll be using my iPad because it's my most convenient. I don't know how to put that computer to do meetings with. Yeah, so let's begin. Okay, screen share on the way. Questions just right beside it. Can you see my screen properly? Audio perfect. Internet good. Okay. So, hello guys. So I will just be doing like a Q&A for some of the questions listed here. And then I'll be calling them out in terms of like the row numbers. So, from like three down, because number two I think is exempt. So the first question in this list is talking about what it takes to get into AWS as a systems engineer. If data structures and algorithms are requirements. So I'll start off with something like how getting into AWS is like, how getting into AWS as a systems engineer is like, and whether data structures and algorithms are requirements. I can invert it. So the data structures and algorithms will come during the interview phase, and then I'll continue what my day-to-day life is like and whether that involves doing data structures and algorithms. What it takes to get into AWS. So AWS is a cloud company, and as opposed to what most people like think on the engineering side, you have the software engineers and the systems engineers. You can think of the software engineers as the people who write code, and you can think of the systems engineers as people who do DevOps. So typically, systems engineering is typically DevOps. The full name for a systems engineer in AWS, systems development engineer. There's also the title systems engineer, but most times systems engineers tend to be a lot more low level. So they most times handle things like the on-prem data centers, um, hypervisors, kernel code, those kind of things. So that's just like the distinguish between the systems DE, which is systems development engineer, and systems engineer. I would cover both just to provide more clarity. And then within the systems engineering path, there's also technical support will resolve issues that customers might have. So every time that you have an issue on AWS and you contact support or premium support, a lot of the times it's someone who could become a systems engineer that's handling that role. Now, what it takes to get into AWS. AWS's interview most times has 5 stages. You have the pre-screening where you're given like some algorithm test or some coding test, some psychological evaluation tests, etc. But most time follows in one single go. Then you then have your first screening interview, which you could think of as a phone screen. Then you then have the second one, which is a technical screen. The first one, you could think of it as a behavioral phone screen, and the second one as a technical screen. After that, you then go to the final stage where you then have a 6 hour long interview, 5 hours and 30 minutes, depending on what section you're going for. And then after that, you get an offer within 7 business days. AWS has a very strict requirement to keep all interview feedback within a week. In terms of whether data structures and algorithms are requirements, I would answer that question by going through what my day-to-day is like. Previously, when I noted what the interview process was like, you would have heard me say there's an algorithm screen. A lot of the times, those algorithm screens are quite simple. They don't really stress it unless the role requires it. But for systems engineering, AWS is more focused on Linux and systems knowledge than algorithms knowledge. So a lot of the times, we would have more attention on Linux and then low-level understandings of Linux, like, okay, what's the syscall? What happens when you type google.com into a browser? If you had this issue, walk me through how you would solve it. That's more the focus of AWS. Other companies like Facebook, Google, Meta, um, yeah, VMware, they did not have like a very strong algorithms requirements, but most other fan companies have very strong requirements for algorithms and data structures. AWS is more focused on the systems admin side, so it's not really a strong requirement. My day to day, I've rarely had to write data structures and algorithms. I've actually not had to use data structures and algorithms throughout my 1 year currently being in AWS. Um, so I think it's kind of exempt. I don't really think you'd find it much of a strong requirement to get in as a systems engineer. What it takes to get into AWS, now I can answer that question since I walked you through what the interview process is like, what my day-to-day is like, whether I use data structures and algorithms. And what it takes is very strong knowledge of Linux, I would say so. Um, and networking generally, like it depends on the team. In my team, we're very networking focused. So they expect that you have good knowledge and understanding of Linux and Linux in terms of the networking aspects and networking in terms of the protocols, the ways that, traffic moves, the various concepts around networking, capacity planning, low-level networking constructs, like what's a packet, what is the anatomy of a packet, how does a packet move, what are the various devices that manage packets like load balancers, firewalls, routers, switches, etc. How do these work within a data center? Those are the kind of things that you require to get into AWS. There are very strongly technical requirements, so it's quite difficult to get in as a systems engineer unless you've had like real world experience. So the alternative that people most times do to get into systems engineering long term is to go via technical support. So from technical support, you would get onboarded to some of the internals of AWS. And then later on, once you've gotten some certain technical primal knowledge, then you can then apply internally to move to a team that offers systems engineering roles. And that is how you can get into AWS as a systems engineer if you lack experience. If you already have experience, then you can directly apply on their sites, Amazon.jobs, and proceed to do the technical interviews as required. So I'll take a pause here and ask whether anyone has questions that I could answer, since it was quite long. Yeah, continue.
Actually, we came late though, so we just met some few things that you say about having strong Linux knowledge before you can get into AWS and stuff like that. So yeah, we're
Yes,
good.
yes, that's typically just the summary. Like to get into AWS, you need strong Linux knowledge. They are very system admin focused, very, very. Most other companies kind of find a balance between being able to write good, efficient code and also balancing the system admin knowledge. AWS is very, very strongly system admin focused. Yes. Okay, so like if there are no questions, I'll continue. So the next question on the list is, how do you build a cloud data architecture? This question is very complicated. Um, so I would give it in terms of summaries and briefs because there's a lot in there. But the way you kind of do it is you kind of have to set everything up. So the way that I would think about it is, what service are you offering as a cloud service? So cloud is a word that is being abused like a lot. Like cloud is like, typically someone would say, oh, cloud is just someone else's computer. it's a very dumbed down, you get analogous way to just say, you know, cloud. But what cloud does is that what cloud actually is offering people infrastructure as a service for various managed infrastructure that they can then build on top, right? Because a lot of the time when you have like something like Google Meets is actually a service as a service, right? But if you wanted to offer someone the platform to build Google Meets, then they are basically building a cloud service. And it's as simple as that, right? If Google Meet offers you APIs to be able to build your own product that offers meeting services, then Google Meet is already a cloud service because you can remotely access their service and also then remotely manage your service on top of their service. And that's just the definition of cloud. It's just a remote service offering built on top of APIs and manage them infrastructure because you don't have to understand how it runs, you just know it runs. And that's kind of like the, you know, meaning of cloud, like beyond the clouds, you're not aware of what's there. You just see the clouds and that's it. How the clouds got there, how they exist is unknown to you. But you can marvel at, its use and also then use it as you please. Any questions on that? I tried my best to answer it as simply as possible. Yes.
Hi,
Hello, hello.
Bakare. Yeah, good
Yes. Good
morning.
morning.
So I have a question, but it's not based on what you just said.
Yeah, continue.
Can I go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely continue.
So I'm sort of like a newbie transitioning into cloud.
Yeah.
And it's quite confusing. So how do I start? Like the
Um.
basics.
Oh yes. So the question is actually listed as number 13. So would
Okay,
you
yeah.
mind like if I jump into that from there? Just to like see maybe like because I know the question comes up quite a lot about like
Okay.
how to become a cloud engineer, etc.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm going to answer your question quite perfectly when it gets there, and I'll make
All
sure.
right. All right. Thank you.
No issues.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. Oh yes, to continue.
Um, like the definition you said about cloud, you said is a remote service managed on top another services, right?
Yes, you can think of it as a remote service that you can access to build your own service on top of it. That's like a
Okay.
very simple
Okay.
definition of what cloud offerings are. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So EC2 instances, ETLs, etc. It's just an aggregator for everything, if that makes sense. So if I have a service and then I offer more services that people can remotely build on top, typically I'm building a cloud service. Yeah. So I shall move to the next question then. How is the typical day-to-day activities of a cloud engineer compared to a systems administrator slash DevOps engineer? Really good question. So the one thing that I always like to say is that DevOps is not a role, it's a culture, right? So let me actually give a demonstration of that from a talk I gave a while back. Oops, that should not have been there. Okay, so I gave a talk a while back. What is DevOps really about? Like maybe about I think 2 years ago. So or 3 years ago, right? So it kind of just focused on like what it's really about. So it's kind of a culture. It's not really a role. And as you then begin to transition into DevOps, you then begin to understand that DevOps is more. It's right here. Like it's not a job; it's a culture where you try to improve the operational aspect of what developers do. Now, a developer is not concerned about where their code should run, how it should run, whether they have geographical limitations. Like now, for example, Netflix is geographically available, but something like PayPal is not, right? PayPal limits their payment services because they have to offer compliance in whatever region they operate. Yeah. So a developer knows that he's just writing code, but he does not have to think about how do I limit this service to work only in the US or only in Europe or within certain parts of Europe, right? They don't want to think about that. That's the DevOps engineer's problem. So when the developer writes the code, the operational engineer then figures out how to do this. Now, the DevOps part then came when it was like, okay, the operational guys, the system admin guys don't know what the developers are writing. They're not concerned with all those business SLAs. They're more concerned with their own SLAs for latency, networking, cloud. What's the budget to set up these instances? So the DevOps guys then came together and were like, okay, we know how to write code and we understand how writing code is like and we understand what paying developers are feeling. And the operational guys were like, oh yeah, like we actually understand, how to build these things together, etc. And that's how DevOps came to be, right? A single person who has both developer and operational experience to be able to fix code that the developers have written, optimize it, and then the operational aspects where you can then manage the code that developers have written and offer better advice on how to operationally deploy it across different places, how to deploy it, best patterns, etc. Right? And that saves a lot of time. And so DevOps has different branches. And as you notice within like a part, you can see system administrators, network operations engineer, cloud operations engineer. So I brought up this list because a lot of times people kind of confuse DevOps, but it's actually just the enveloping umbrella. It's not like a side note of cloud operations. It's what envelops cloud operations and system administrators. So you can also then see SRE. So that's where I feature in site reliability. So it's most times more programming focused, strongly programming focused, because we have to then delve into like how the code runs, and majorly a lot of times it's very um globally oriented. So yeah, I just thought to bring this up. So let me then pull this back and open this question. So yeah, so going back to the question, typical day-to-day activities of a cloud engineer compared to a systems administrator. As you've now understood, a DevOps engineer encompasses both. Now, a cloud engineer most times is focused with cloud services. So let me give you an example. Now, if I were a cloud engineer, I would be more focused on, okay, say a customer developed a payroll service and they're planning to onboard this to about 6 regions, right? They have an SLA to deliver this service at, say, 99.9% availability. Let's put it like that, right? And the idea for them is that they want to make sure that this service is cost friendly and manageable. Now, that's where a cloud engineer comes in, because a cloud engineer is focused on those kind of things because they can't run their service locally. Now, if that payroll service had their own data center, right, then typically you wouldn't need a cloud engineer to do that. You would need, a systems administrator, because a cloud engineer is more concerned with what runs on AWS. He has an understanding of the internals of cloud service offerings, right? Like, oh, okay, AWS offers this way to create these instances, right? Spot instances so that you can save costs. You can use a reserved instance for this particular service, etc. But on-prem, a cloud engineer might not really have that grand understanding of, oh, what is a rack? Why do I need 2 use of space? How do I manage cooling? Right? What would be the cost of cooling? What would be the net, space to keep all those, servers and everything? So the domain kind of shifts from a managed service offered by a cloud provider to someone now managing the entire infrastructure locally. And that's just a very small example of what like systems admins do. So back in the old days, before cloud was a thing, DevOps was typically just systems administrators, because you needed to understand how to deploy the operating system, right? Because you would have thousands of machines. One person cannot go to each rack and deploy manually. So that's where things like Ansible came up, right? And then various parts like that. Because you notice for cloud engineers, they're most times using Terraform. It's kind of in that mindset, right? Puppet and Chef are kind of gone away. Those are like orchestration tools. So imagine if you could write code to build like an EC2 instance, things like that. That's where, you know, those things kind of came up on. But systems admins are more focused with on-prem core Linux offerings. Cloud engineers are more focused on cloud services and how to then manage that, on their services. So a cloud engineer is more focused on running on AWS, Google Cloud, etc. A systems engineer is more focused with on-prem, VMware, Xen, those kind of like managed on-prem operations. Yeah. Did that make sense? Just a random, question so that I could explain further.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
it did.
but yeah. But so it's okay.
Okay. So now the second question, how can I be a cloud engineer without being a systems administrator? So I think I kind of answered a bit of it. Like cloud engineers are more focused with cloud services, but you still would understand like Linux and networking and all those other things, but it would be more domain focused on cloud offerings. Like now, Google Cloud might have a quota on how much networking traffic a single host can, you know, can push out. Like, okay, let me explain like this. Imagine you have like a bottle of water. You could imagine a cloud engineer seeing the bottle of water and being like, okay, how do I um, get this bottle of water to serve everyone within like a floor, right? A systems engineer makes the bottle, finds the water, and then serves it to the team. So things like that, that's like the difference between having a managed service where it's offered to you and then you can then decide how you want to do it versus a system admin who has to then build everything from the ground up if it does not exist or manage it as it then goes across. Typically, the cloud engineer zone is just done like the cloud provider just provides the bottle. He has to go buy it. Um, so yeah, so you can be a cloud engineer without being a systems admin, although the requirements kind of intersect because the only difference is that okay, the cloud engineer just works on with cloud services. So a systems admin could easily become a cloud engineer. A cloud engineer could easily become a systems admin. It's just domain shifts, right? Okay, now I have to go find the bottle for the cloud engineer. And the systems administrator is like, okay, everything is provided. I just need to manage it, right? etc. Regarding being a software engineer who builds stuff on the cloud and not do systems administration, that is very easy because cloud services offer you managed services. So you don't need to go look for the bottle. You don't need to know how the bottle works. There are various instances of managed services that already help you deploy software. Things like Heroku. Heroku is a cloud service, right? You don't need to think about where it's running. You just run it, right? Heroku would hire a systems administrator for their services, right? So that's like kind of the difference, right, between having a cloud service and building a cloud service. It's a lot more intricately like complex. So a systems admin would most times be the person they would handle. If you're a software engineer, just deploy on Heroku, App Engine, Elastic Beanstalk, and those other services. You don't need to do systems administration. You might never have to. Okay. Did I answer that second question properly? Just out of curiosity.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. So moving on to the next question. So I'm trying my best to make sure that I note the questions so that they're kind of shown down here. So that just in case anyone is kind of looking for it, you can also then see right down here so that this does not confuse you. This is the current question focus. So yeah. So the next question is the market not ready to adopt intern and junior cloud engineers? There's so limited openings for intern and juniors in the cloud space except for seniors. And I do understand your pain quite well because when I started, I discovered the exact same thing. So, so the issue with DevOps in general, as you'd notice, is that like there is a lot of branches and there's a lot of residual knowledge, right? Because you need to know a lot of things. You need to like mash up, networking and Linux and writing code and knowing how to write code and knowing how to deploy that code and knowing how to optimize it and knowing how to optimize it so that it runs, at scale, knowing how to optimize it so that, you can then build services on top of it, knowing how to optimize it so that you can, like, it's a lot of complexity and also there's a lot of domain knowledge. Like, you can't read a book about Cisco routers, right? You need to have used a Cisco router. And those things are pricey, and you're not going to get it in your day-to-day life, right? It's something you probably got hired to learn about, or you joined the company. So that's why I noted that for intern and junior cloud engineers, you are quite limited to support roles. Now, let me explain. In the hierarchy of cloud engineering, right, people who do not have like experience internally go for support roles because it's the easiest way to gain that experience. Because of the complexities of cloud and um, systems engineering, it takes a while. Normally, you can get a systems engineering role as an intern, um, but it's a bit difficult and there are quite limited opportunities because everyone knows that it's quite difficult, right? There's a very steep learning curve. So you can join as a support engineer. Now, support engineers are people who kind of manage issues that people have running these services, right? So the beautiful context about it is that, like in support, everyone expects that you do not know everything, but you're learning how to learn everything. So um, most times your quotas are limited to okay, you're answering customers' questions and resolving them quite quickly. So as you then begin to take up support roles, you begin to understand different contexts about like how DevOps engineers resolve problems, right? Because a lot of the times the customer issues are related to things that we've already built and you are now managing for the customer on their behalf because they don't have the technical experience, but you have the technical experience to be able to resolve that problem. And that requires domain knowledge, which is what they are lacking. So intern and junior roles, you would be expected to start off from support, gather the experience in offering support, and then once you then have a good enough standing, you can then move into now actually building and managing the services with that contextual knowledge that you've gained for that particular service that you're offering support on. Support roles are available in different companies, not just Fang. You also have support in Cloudflare, Airbnb, technical support to be more precise. And those roles offer you the experience and ability to then learn about the application, the infrastructure it runs on, etc. So if you have issues getting a job as a junior cloud engineer or as an intern cloud engineer, I would suggest that you switch from searching for jobs for DevOps engineers to jobs for technical support engineers, and you have a lot more success there. Um, was anything unclear regarding that last question? If it's not, then I think we can continue. How does that sound? Okay, okay. Number 7. Is it important to know how to code as a cloud engineer? If so, what programming languages do you recommend? In terms of like knowing how to code as a cloud engineer, I would say that it's required, but not fully required. To be a cloud engineer, you typically just need to know how to do scripting, so Bash, Python, and you know some DSLs. Like Terraform has theirs called HCL, right, which you can use to define code, infrastructure as code, right? Those kind of things. So just having basic programming experience, understanding what conditionals are, loops, all those kind of things, they help you learn, if that makes sense. And knowing how to code is not fully important. It's not like software engineering kind of writing code where data structures, algorithms, blah, blah, blah. No, just good understanding of programming and how to optimize and write code is all you need. It's not really a strong requirement. Number 8, how can newbies get internships to get hands-on experience? So internships in DevOps are quite limited. I had covered that in question 6. So again, you would be better off considering support roles. Yes. Okay, I think someone wants to ask a question. Any questions? Okay. Okay, no questions, yes? Okay, we're good. Okay, so again, for those joining, the questions are listed down here. So I click on them so that it becomes easier for everyone to kind of read and see what's being spoken about, etc. So that there's adequate context being passed along. So this next question reads, I'm a security analyst and I'm currently starting AWS CP. So CP, for those who don't know, stands for Cloud Practitioner. So it's a certification from AWS that shows that you know how to use and manage certain cloud services that they offer on their platform. So what pathway do you recommend I follow to be relevant in the cloud ecosystem? I don't have any programming skills, but I'm learning Python. So as I've said before, it's typically support if you want to get knowledge of what that domain is like. There's no other way, or you can pick it up gradually and learn, or you reach out for internships. Linux Foundation offers a couple via. Let me try and do like a quick note of that. So the Linux Foundation has this thing called LFX, where you can then go and apply for internships on so like you can become like a mentor. So this is like what the site is like, LFX mentorship, and then you can also then view their projects. So a lot of the times, right, you can see like a couple like Chaos, Chips, Centaurus, this Hyperledger, etc. So if you go to their projects, I think most of the times you can also then apply to get access. I'm trying to remember the so Linux Foundation mentorship. Yeah, so this is it, LFX. So for those who are looking to start, you can just check the LFX program from the Linux Foundation. Yes, it's very much open source, and then you then be able to, get started from here. Yes, so and then these are the kind of things that you can then get into, and then begin to start. So you can choose to become a mentee, and then you enroll in a program, etc, etc. Yeah, so for those who are looking to start, LFX mentorship is also another opportunity to do that. Any questions there on this?
Oh no, thank you.
Okay. Next question, roles in cloud. So I had covered this from the initial document, so I'll send this in the chat. I would document the links now and start sending them in here so that I think others who are joined can also then get access to some of the things that we've spoken about. So that's one. And this is for the LFX mentorships in terms of the diversity and inclusion aspect for those who wish to get access to projects, mentorships, etc. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So skills needed as a cloud engineer. I've covered some parts of this in the speaker deck link I sent regarding like things to learn about being a cloud engineer. And so it just follows up from that. Writing code is one, understanding DevOps internals is another. Networking, compute, Linux internals, and various other aspects of domain specific knowledge about hardware, etc, networking protocols, all of that. Okay, how do you let people know you can use AWS when you don't have money to pay service bills for your projects? Okay, I don't really think I understand this question. Does someone who have context explain? Maybe I'm reading it wrong. Okay, I think I'll skip this question. Okay, as this was asked by IDGen previously, yes. So I think I've answered this question. Would you like me to go further? Hello?
Yes, go further, please.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, so So I'd covered like a small question here about like, okay, if you're a newbie transitioning to cloud engineering, typically the easiest way would be to take cloud certification exams. Yes, that's in terms of like getting experience. Um, so a lot of the time, the courses are readily available on Udacity. There's one in particular that I like recommending, which is so most times cloud providers build on top of AWS. Let me also send this in. So this is Georgia Tech's online curriculum for computer science. So for those of us who probably didn't study computer science in school, you can also take that. It's a very, very good one. I like recommending. So Udacity offers a cloud computing course. I think it's free. Last I checked. So I like using it a lot because it's very, you know, good. They cover like AWS and various other cloud provider, solutions, etc. This is the one that I always recommend, the cloud DevOps engineer one. So it starts off in 3 days. So if you like, you can also enroll. Um, and pick up on the experiences that are documented there, etc. That's kind of it. Regarding like the full school that they offer regarding like various other courses for others who want to maybe go into other things, that's also available. So there's some on AWS for those that are offering the cloud practitioner, cloud architects. You can take this one's hybrid cloud engineering. This one is more focused on-premise, off-premise, hyper-converged infrastructure, which is kind of like a mix of on-prem and cloud services. All of that is available within this course. It will be a bit more complex, and I don't really have too much knowledge on this subject, so I cannot typically state what that's like. Site reliability engineering. This one is more focused on cloud infrastructure natively, so also very complex. Yeah, so that's kind of like what I would say for cloud engineering. You're better off taking courses, and then for employment, you can then transition into support roles to get an understanding of the work life there. Does that sound good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So this question, since literally every company wants to employ someone with a lot of experience as their cloud DevOps, how does a beginner get their foot in the door? Again, support engineering roles. There's really no easier way. Like they have very low technical requirements, reasonably good pay, and the work hours are also very not strenuous. So that's grand. What is the best course you can recommend to purchase on Udemy for DevOps and cloud computing? I think I've answered this question indirectly by providing the Udacity links. So I can actually push up from there. It's free, so no need to purchase. So I think that kills two birds with one stone. I would like to know how the cloud really works in terms of operations and network. So this is very complex, if I were to go in full detail. But the idea of it, if you'd really like to know, I can actually give a very good example. So there's a question that goes around whenever you are doing any interview for DevOps SRE infrastructure roles, which is what happens when I type google.com into the browser. Now, this question explains typically how the cloud works, and a lot of people have covered in great detail how that works. But I'll send this one, which I think is the best one I've seen. This covers like things like HSTS, which is hyper serve transport security, which basically just enforces HTTPS. Oh, hyper strict transport security, HTTP rather. So I kind of like this one because it has like some DevOps knowledge inside it. So I'll send the link likewise, and yeah, like this would then answer like a bit of like what's the process is like. So let me send that to you right now. So Obioma, everything is free. Nothing is paid for. So yeah. So during my interview with Amazon, did I have a data structures interview? No. So during my interview with Amazon, more specifically AWS, I did not have a data structures and algorithms interview. I had a coding interview, but I wouldn't say it was data structures and algorithm specific. For my interviews with other companies like Google, Apple, Meta, um, and various others, yes, Zalando, I also had those. But for most other, for Amazon, no, they're very, very focused on systems. Very little focus on coding and algorithms. And it's mostly just due to the way their infrastructure is built up. You don't write a lot of code. You mostly just need to know how things work because they built everything from the ground up. So it's very, very difficult to just write code. You typically don't have to write code at all. You need to walk through the process of, a lot of systems related things. So yes, that's all the questions. So I think now we can do an open QA. Um, Adora,
So
how
the
would you?
link you sent, the link
Huh?
you sent, like the nano cloud computing you sent, they are not free.
Oh, okay. The ones that are not free. That's the one for the School of Cloud Computing, yes? Oh, okay. The nano degree isn't free. Huh. Okay. Wait, let me actually check that now. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This one actually isn't free. Huh. Yeah. Everyone, yeah, like I have so many names to be honest. Yeah. 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 I know that there are a couple others that I saw that were they free? No. No. The ones for cloud computing here were not free. Like they were before. Like but then I've not touched this in like 2, 3 years. So I guess it's kind of changed since then. Okay. So yeah, like I'll get a couple and send them across and by Adora. Yes. Also, Adora, how are we doing on time? Pretty good, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So let's do an open QA. Any questions that you'd like to ask that were not covered in the sheets? Oh, the Udacity requires JavaScript knowledge. Okay. So I'll pull out the questions from the in-call messages, so we can take like a couple of them. Yeah. So as you don't want to, as you have more questions, just kindly put them down. So the Udacity scholarship requires JavaScript knowledge. I took the assessment and didn't make it. So uh, it's a bit tricky though. Uh, so I would say that like if that's the case, then maybe it might be best to just wait. Maybe another could find like would I'll pass across like a couple courses to Adora that I don't think require um that and then also offer like some links that are free so that you can then get started. That'd be better. Okay, Daffy, I hope I answered your question fine. So the next question, what's your take on serverless technologies from Real Omi? Okay, quite the nickname. Yeah, serverless is typically not serverless. It runs on a server. But what serverless means is that your application doesn't run 24/7. Like let me put it like this. So imagine if like you sent a request to me, right? And I'm basically in the room with you. Now, for me to be able to answer you, I need to be awake 24/7, which is not possible, right? Because it takes a very large cost on me to be able to stay awake to answer your questions. Now, if it were possible for me to only wake up and answer your questions when you needed to ask them, then that would be a lot more beneficial because, like, it's still on your schedule, but I don't need to be awake 24/7 to give those answers. So that's what serverless is like. A lot of the time, the way traditional infrastructure was run is that you needed a server and you needed that server to be running 24/7, 7 days a week. And that was not very cost friendly because most times people had off days. Like you could be running um say a service that provides memes, but people don't request memes 24/7. Sometimes they are asleep. So what serverless then did was that, okay, fine, turn off the server if we don't have any requests for, like, say 20 minutes, right? So that we can save costs, right? Because it's off. Now, the serverless part of it is that, okay, when someone else sends a request within that 10 minute window, start the server, start the application, and respond to them. Then wait another 10 minutes. See if they send any more requests. If they don't, shut it down again. Now, as you notice, that is very, very friendly for costs because you don't need to run it 24/7 and you're only billed according to how long it runs. Now, the only downside is that, okay, fine, your application has to start up again when someone sends a request. But if people are going to send more requests anyway, it's already up and running within those 10 minutes before it shuts down. So it would basically just have a very slow start time at the beginning and then a normal run time as it continues. And that's basically the best thing about serverless. So it's good for projects that are async in a sense. Like, take for example, now you wanted to send someone an email. You don't need the email server running 24/7. You just need to send the email when someone sends the email. So you make your email server serverless. When they send the email, the application starts. It gets the email request, it sends it to who it needs to send it to, and then it just goes off. You get. Serverless would not be good for stateful services. Things like, you know, what's a very stateful service? Like a database, for example. You can't run a database on serverless because databases won't take too long to load. And there's a lot of in-memory things like indexes, caches, so that it can respond to queries a lot faster. So those are things that cannot run on serverless. People have experimented with it, but the domains are quite very limited, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's my take on serverless. It's good, but you need to understand the context first. Did I answer your question, real homie? Yeah. So the next one. How can a backend engineer migrate to SRE from Jacob Kende Metibemu? You typically just have to take your time to understand a lot of the DevOps related stuff. So if you already do backend engineering, it's kind of easier because you already know how to write code. But then you then have to then understand a lot of the systems related stuff like Linux, networking, and all those other things. And I speak a lot about networking because that's where I'm kind of biased towards because I do that day to day. But there's also like the parts on compute, queues, um, and various other services compute, for example, like hypervisors, etc. So those are like some of the things you need to learn. Can you suggest good and comprehensive resources on networking? So the problem with networking is that it's a bit complicated. Because there's a very, like, networking is very strange because a part of it is duct tape, like literally duct tape. And then you also need to kind of understand the low level stuff before you can understand the high level stuff, right? You can understand, okay, if I send a request, I get the ARIA certificate is validated, all those kind of things. It takes a while, but I don't have any comprehensive courses. I only have the ones that are a bit more intricately defined. So there's this one from Nick Frimster that I kind of watched. So Nick Frimster is a professor at I've forgotten what school, but he offers a couple courses that are kind of engaged in networking. A lot of them have watched over time. Things like NAT, packet switching, some graph related things, etc. So I would suggest this course, which is focused on computer networking. It's very it starts off slow and then it then begins to bring you into things about like how the internet works, some things like ARP, which there's quite a lot in it. So I would leave that off, I think, until when it's kind of necessary. But that's the link to the playlist. Also in this Georgia Tech link that I previously sent, there's actually a networking course just right below, right here. So for those who are also willing to also take it, you can start from here. But although networking is very broad, this one is more focused on security and software-defined networking. And it's an intermediate level course. So for beginners, it might not particularly offer you much aid, and it's very algorithm focused because you have things like distance vectors, which is basically like graph algorithms for routing and so that's another thing to consider. Yes, so but I've sent both of them. Hopefully that helps. I'm currently learning Google computing with Google and Ella. Do they work the same way with AWS? Yes. A lot of the concepts are duplicated, right? So if you are learning from one cloud provider, it's very easy to learn with another. The only difference might just be, oh, you click on this link, or this is where you access this information, or you have more requirements, but typically it's the same process. Yeah, that's a defined standard. I think for question 12, the person was referring to personal projects when I want to deploy it on AWS, but you were unable to pay for the services you want to use. Okay, Faith Covey. So initially there was a question that I did not know how to answer. This was question 12, which was focused on how do you let people know you can use AWS when you don't have money to pay service bills for your projects. So the way to do it is that normally AWS offers you a free tier for 1 year where you can build and experiment on your services free of charge within limits that they've already set. So you can create an AWS account and not really have to pay. Well, you would pay something maybe between like $1, which is about 600 naira. So it's a very fair amount, honestly, if you're going to like experiment with their various services. Yeah. So I would, and then there's also this other thing too called Quick Labs, which allows you to take nano degrees. Where is it here? Yeah. So Quick Labs allows you to take nano degrees, and also then use like cloud services to test out some of the ideas that you're learning. So I would suggest that if you also want to test and learn things out, but you do not have the finances to do so, Quick Labs is a very good way to get started with those. So yes, thanks Kobe for the clarification. And I hope this kind of answers how to go about using AWS without paying for AWS or Google Cloud, etc. Hello, so I'm an application administrator in a fintech. We don't do DevOps and SRE, so we monitor services and all. We are trying to convert to VMs while taking a course. I still don't understand the entire concept because there's no practice environment. Okay, so like if you wanted to learn about Code Cloud actually has something that would be beneficial to you. So Code Cloud has a playground. Yeah, and the playground allows you to gain access to cloud and infrastructure services to test things out. You can test out Kubernetes, you can test out Docker, etc. So like if you kind of have this, maybe you could speak to your company in terms of like engaging in a paid plan to access it. I checked, I'm not sure how expensive it is, but I don't think it should be because it's about 499. I don't know what currency that is, but typically like you'd be able to get this at a reasonable price. Let me check. 499 INR. INR to dollars. That's all Indian rupees. So you can see it's about $6. So that's more than adequate for any company account. So yeah, so that would be fine. But yes, thank you, Tammy. Yeah, I sadly did not know. I know, but now I do. Yes, so Akene, I guess you just have to understand the system and the skills should be transferable. Oh, okay, that's answering someone else's question for GCP. That's correct. That's very correct. With the cloud practitioner certification, so a lot of the times, right, the certifications help, but they are most times looking for hard experience. So I would say get the certifications, do the nano degrees, and then apply for the roles. A lot of the times it's just a mix of either one. Plus, job interviews are very um, unconventional, so you might be experienced, but there's a different kind of skill set to pass job interviews that is sadly less technical. In fact, not technical, in fact. So I would say get the experience and the other parts you like that's definitely much easier to figure out. Okay, so it seems there are no more questions, so I think we can round off just on time at 11 p.m., 11 a.m. rather. Yeah, so okay, Abdullah Mead. So I'm taking this as the last question. So what are the projects or examples one can do for cloud or DevOps? So for this, so there's a site called roadmap to sh/DevOps. So this offers like a roadmap. I think I need to put HTTPS for it to be able to, So just 1 second. Why is it? So typically, right, this would give you access to like a particular roadmap of different things that you can use to learn. So you can just check here, like you can see cloud design patterns, etc. So if you check here, just take some time to go through some of the projects that are done in here and you complete it. Okay. Any more questions? You can, I don't really know the name. Okay, so I think about if there are no more questions, then I think we can round it off. If you have any more, you can always reach out to me on Slack or via dollar as needed. And this has been video. So, Adora, anything else, or it's good for today?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes. So,
Thank you, Barker. Thank you, Adora.
Yeah, no problem.